Hi everybody, this is Karak from ACG, and today I bring to you the review of Zombie Vikings, a game about, well, zombies and Vikings, which when you think about Vikings' proclivity for death, really this is just skipping the middle step and going straight to the source. Viking Zombies is a 4-player cut, smash, stab, skewer them up in the vein of old classic titles like Three Dirty Dwarves and Streets of Rage, as seen through a George Romero filter. Created by Zoink Games and on Steam now for $16, let's see how Zombie Vikings fares. As always, if you liked the video, maybe subscribe. So let's get to it, shall we? Here's the review for Zombie Vikings. A god's missing eyeball, candy cane swords, a girl raised by pissy crows, and eating mushrooms that grew inside someone's fat folds. I really wish that last one was a joke. Graphics are up first. To be honest, this is some eclectic fare. If you bred Raymond with Mr. Bones and the baby was raised by those emo creatures from Where the Wild Things Are, you'd probably most likely have something like this. Everything from the main character's unique zombie mismatches like a sea captain with a squid for a spine or a pissed off gremlin voodoo priest with a skull on a stick as a special weapon, the game practically leaks atmosphere all over the floor. The world is suitably warped with no straight lines, and everything has a bent and curved look to it that channels Dr. Seuss vibes throughout. Now, with numerous artistic references, the game's variety and visual presentation could have harmed its atmosphere. But it's actually got an overall artistic theme that fits regardless if you're doing battle in a sugar hell land or the deep dark caves ruled by sentient worms that worry about their children's college tuitions. In the end, if you're like me, fighting pissed off crow hybrids while wielding a cat on a stick isn't going to be all that surprising, but let's not ruin it for those who don't freebase George Carlin's ashes on a regular basis. The atmosphere through and through is just really good. Now, animation is stellar, and though the frame rate can take noticeable nosedives when the going gets tough, the title is held aloft on an art design that's purely fantastic, with a sheen of supernatural splendor that mets out an interesting and diverse worldview as you continue your quest to conquer. Everything from the enemies to the worlds to the players all interact on a thematic focal point. And even when you think, how does this actually fit here? After a bit, it just sort of seems to organically make sense and slides into place. One absolutely excellent standout is character shadowing, which isn't something I mention very often, but it's also not something that's in smash 'em ups very often. And when you see a cutscene and everyone is throwing light correct shadows, it does a tremendous job in solidifying their presence in the game world without looking like 2D cardboard cutouts. Whether you call these titles bash 'em ups or hack 'em ups or slash 'em ups, it's a suitably twisted wonder for the eyes, even if at times it's a bit off-putting simply due to how disgusting some of the bits are. Graphically, very, very good. Sound, music, and voice.
If I told you I could grow mushrooms on any part of my body, would that make you hungry?
I just ate.
Now, sound is up first in this trilogy of audio awesome, and I thought the sound was actually pretty good, and though it's easy to get lost in the chaos of the visuals on screen action, for the most part everything is separated well enough that a player can use both visual and sound cues to understand what's occurring. And you're gonna need it, because let's be honest, when you're playing one of those critters from that 1980s horror movie and jack them up on amphetamines, it's gonna be a bit difficult to understand what's going on anyway. And that's really where the sound ends up helping out. The entire spectrum is adequately well represented here and there, but there is some muddiness when the swords get swinging. That being said, each level has little environmental audio snippets like owls in the haunted woods that did a great deal to settle the atmosphere a bit, especially in between battles. Music. Now, this is hit and miss and incredibly random to me, so much so that during a couple levels, those playing with me commented on the music as seeming completely disconnected from the levels themselves. What that usually means is it's not so much a fitting accompaniment, but music for music's sake, and that seems to be a fair assessment, with some tracks appearing almost separate from what's going on the screen. For example, the haunted areas had music that, instead of haunting, seemed like it belonged at a high school band practice, and the strange, almost experimental music in a warped out Candyland doing nothing to really concrete the atmosphere there at all. Now, boss music, however, is pretty good, with guitar riffs and far more energetic execution than the rest of the title. It's here, though, that the different musical tracks hits home the hardest. Every single area within Zombie Vikings feels disconnected from the areas around it with no overarching themes. That doesn't mean the music is bad, far from it. It just doesn't fit what's going on the screen or layered across the levels at all. Good music, somewhat poor musical choices. Voice. To many people, voice is humor in these games. Three Dirty Dwarves nailed it with their eclectic handling of idiotic, bumbling protagonists and the unique world that they lived within and experienced. Here, though, most of the humor falls flat. There's a ton of voice, most of it is actually very well done, but aside from the occasional one-liners, the delivery falls flat in the desire to tell you that it's funny versus show you that it's funny. Now, what's really nice about something like this is just because it didn't hit with me doesn't mean it won't hit with you. However, I had multiple people playing co-op with me, and strangely, no one actually thought it was that funny. Though it could have hit on all cylinders, it misses more time than it has any right to, especially with such a creative and rich environment at its imaginative feet. I would say I was honestly disappointed. Gameplay. Now, I think it's good to remember that a game like this either hinges on unique gameplay offerings or on its characters or world to keep the gamer's interest throughout, especially when considering that these titles usually are not the deepest of gaming gauntlets. Like most bash-em-ups, you end up picking 1 to 4 characters, all of them dead Vikings that are now zombies. You have a squid-torsoed pirate, a Viking raised by crows who became their leader, one that was already pretty much a zombie and eating brains before they even became one, and lastly, a huge steroidal weightlifting zombie brawler in her own right with artistic representation that looks like every Viking opera singer caricature you remember, except cross her with a zombie as well, and you pretty much get the picture. You find out quickly enough that for some reason you're after Loki, who recently stole Odin's eye. The fact that you're zombies, strangely, actually has very little to do with anything in the story. In the end, it's a beat-em-up, with every character having a default attack as well as some special attacks and grabs and throws and all kinds of different blocking that you can do within it. The bit of teamwork you can do, which is stunningly alone in its offering, is the ability to stab your friends and toss them at enemies. Now, I was really disappointed that there weren't a large number of attacks you could do as a team in the title. I think that would have been a place where the game could have really ended up shining through. As you adventure, you can use cash you get throughout the game levels to buy new weapons as well as various rune stones you unlock that do things like make you run faster or have extra health. At its core, it's a somewhat shallow title. You run mostly from left to right and smash the shit out of anything in your way, and then at some point face a boss or boss-style character, and then defeat them with the award-winning domestic violence strategy of hitting them more than they hit you. Where a good deal of the enjoyment is going to come from is seeing the unique locations and occasionally buying new items. Control is slick, and even after buying a speed runestone for the fastest character in the game, it was spot on, and I felt in control at all times, blocking, spinning, throwing, and slashing enemies regardless of their number on screen. Sometimes while adventuring, you'll get side quests, and these turned out to be the shotgun marriages of the entire game. Both the best and worst parts of the experience, distilled down to a few sentences uttered by both parties and then violence followed by regret. They're ultimately the best parts of the title because it felt so different from most smash-em-ups with a bunch of people singing the words "side quests" whenever you unlock them, and collecting them did well to break up the monotony. Until you realize many of the side quests are less than 1 to 2 minutes to beat, and I mean it. I would get a quest run 4 feet and there was the goal. Now, the levels themselves aren't that big, but come on, something has to be fixed there. Grabbing some item and returning it to the quest giver 5 feet away usually resulted in me getting a funny sword with a unique skill, like a cat on a stick or a bloated tongue sword that made enemies ill, or better yet, a skunk mistaken for a cat that is also on a stick and therefore also a sword. That's pretty much the game as a whole. Enemy variety is high, however, and I really did enjoy their different designs. Fun factor. So despite some weaknesses in the gameplay and a humor that's only going to hit at certain times with certain people, the game does have some good gameplay chops. It's not a masterclass in its genre, far from it. Instead, it's an enjoyable romp that will get you laughs while you collect warped memories from being introduced sword first to the game's odd world, and perhaps some enjoyment from the title's unique sense of humor. While its environments are interesting to say the least, and its enemies and at times their variety offered a good deal of eye candy, the rote gameplay absolutely hurt this title in the long run. So I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never talk about it again rating scale. The game is good, but not great. It's enjoyable, but much of the time I would not label it as fun. And at $15, it's on the steep end for what I ended up getting out of it. I would say this. It's a wait for a sale, not because it's bad, but because what is good is just adequate. And the fact that we don't get these kinds of games as often as we would like doesn't excuse it from expectations. A sequel would do well to offer more interactivity, make the side quests at least somewhat difficult or more lengthy, and perhaps better integrate the main characters with their world to make things just sort of feel layered and progressive and together. So that's it for me. If you liked the review, hit thumbs up. If you didn't, hit thumbs down. And as always, peace out.
Zombie Vikings squid people have got to go!